How are y'all doing?
All right.
I've got a different microphone. This is the one that Ethan used that first day. And so I fixed it because it does have a more reliable audio pickup. So I do want to have that. But I also have my phone to pick up any questions or conversations that may happen this evening. If you're wondering about the schedule next week, I'll go ahead and let you know I had a great lunch with Mick Beadsmore today from Central. He's the new preacher out there. He's looking forward to being here next Wednesday. And I'll tell you, he's a neat guy. He and I really got off on a great foot, and so he's a really neat guy. Yesterday I went out to eat with Brett McCaslin. He'll be coming the next Wednesday night. He's from the Colonies. He's also a neat guy. Boy, he's got a cool professional history. I don't know if he'll talk about that, but it's really neat. And then the next Wednesday after that, we'll have somebody you heard last year, Ben Moranis will be back. He did a great job, and he'll be back. He's from Golden Plains. And so we just kind of wanted to bring in some guys from other churches in the area out of solidarity. And plus, it's just kind of nice to hear some of these guys and how they present and study. And I honestly think that when preachers hear other preachers, I think it does make them better preachers. We're all on a journey to learn and become better. And so I really do look forward to that. So I hope you'll be here for those 3 Wednesday nights. And then I'll be back in the final Wednesday night. So of the month of August. To quote Lyndon, I think he said something. What did you say about that? You're like, he said something like, well, that, it's not as exciting. Or something like that. But all right, let's take a look at some of these signs you've probably heard. Check it out. Have you seen that one?
Oh, that's great.
I've actually seen that one. All right, here's another one. That's probably true. Probably true. How about this one? Acting perfect in church is like dressing up for an X-ray. I think that one is true. Yeah. This next one's my favorite. Yeah. I like food, right? Okay, I take it back. This one's my favorite right here. Here we go. Last one. You should know better than to steal some AC units from a church. You know what I mean? That's terrible. Tonight we're going to be talking about building up a church. And I think this is an important conversation. We'll have a little bit of discussion, but not tons. Ooh, somebody clamped them down and licked it. Hold on.
I'm so sorry.
Aha! You know who it is. Hold on. And so there'll be a little bit of discussion, but not a ton. But I think it's an important subject. We went to a PTO meeting, Andy and I, yesterday. I am the vice president of membership on the PTO for Olson Park Elementary. Pray for them. Pray for me. But there was one of the people from the school who came, and Allison had this hat, and it said, Summer Brain. And I like that, Summer Brain. And right now, I and a lot of kids, and I think parents who've been off for the summer are suffering from summer brain. You know what I mean? And I think sometimes, as churches, we suffer from summer brain. But it's not a summer. It's caused by our comfort level and what we get used to, what we like to do, and we get stuck in this little rut, and we get summer brain. And so I want to invite you this evening to leave that behind and take on, hopefully, a new mode if this is the case. Now, I will say Anna Street Church of Christ is an outstanding church to be at. I've loved it, and I continue. I'll love it for a long time, God willing. And it's great because we do a lot of great things in the community, and I don't want you to forget that, but there's some other things we're going to talk about tonight. Whenever we talk about building up a church or church in general or the method of church, this verse often comes to mind. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all the things I commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. And when we look at that, often preachers use this and they come up with a sermon that has 3 points. That you should go make disciples, that you should baptize them, and that you should teach them to observe all that He commanded. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's Jesus. In fact, there's a lot of churches, including Anna Street. If you go to our website, to where it says mission and visions, it says our mission is the same as Jesus's, to make disciples, to baptize, and to teach people to observe the commands of Jesus. And something like that. A lot of churches do that. And there's nothing wrong with that, but the thing is you're really identifying yourself with all Christian churches, and you're not really thinking about that. And so tonight I want to kind of think about this. When we think about what Jesus says here, what we find is that, in essence, what Jesus is saying is, make the kingdom bigger. Do what I say. Go out. Make disciples. And with every disciple you make, kingdom gets bigger. We find when we look at Acts chapter 2, which is another big scripture for this subject, we look at this to look at the behavior of the early church, and we see that they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to Christian teaching. That they devoted themselves to fellowship. What does that mean? Well, it means they devoted themselves to a group that gathered together to break bread, to eat together, and for prayer. That they helped those in need, there in verse 45. That they attended the temple. Now, question for you, where it says attended the temple, why? Why did they attend the temple? They're Christian. Why are they going to the Jewish temple? This is an open question for anyone.
To convert the Jews.
To convert the Jews. You know, it was very seamless because Christianity is a Jewish faith. It was a Jewish faith. It is a Jewish faith. It is the capstone to the Jewish faith. Jews believed in the Messiah, waited on the Messiah. He came. They rejected him. And this new group of Jews said, no, he is the Messiah. And they became the Christian faith. It's a Jewish faith. It was very easy for them to do this because how many of them grew up going to that same temple? You know, hearing Gamaliel. How many years had some of them, like Paul, heard Gamaliel? And then they go to the temple, and then they go home and they break bread. They eat together again. Now, what's interesting about this is we see that the pattern changes. We see all these people who are living according to this Old Testament idea, listening to these Jewish rabbis only, all of a sudden listening to Christian teaching, breaking bread and having fellowship together, and still going to the temple and bringing some of them to eat at home and being hospitable. For what purpose? I like what Paul writes here. Speaking truth and love, we are to grow up in every way into the head, which is Christ. We grow into Christ. So when I take these three scriptures, it makes sense to me that if we want to make the kingdom bigger, our pattern must change so that we grow into Christ.
To be more like Him.
To be more like Him. These things go together. If you want to make the kingdom bigger according to Christ's command, your pattern has to change. And in the process, you do become more like Christ. And so tonight, that's really what we're going to be talking about. It did it to me too. So we're going to talk about making the kingdom bigger requires our pattern to change. Okay. Making the kingdom bigger, acting on our commission from Jesus Christ, requires our pattern to change, which is in a very general sense and in somewhat of a more applicable sense. It requires us to build relationships, to have purposeful gatherings, to have effective community outreach. So those are the three things I essentially want to talk about tonight. Build relationships. It's good for us to hear this kind of sermon because I think we often think, well, I know this stuff. But I think we get our summer brain and we stop doing it. So when we talk about building relationships, there's essentially two things I want you to think of. Number one, in order to build relationships, to make the kingdom grow, we have to have a sense of belonging, a sense of personal connection at that church we're visiting. You know, someone walks in the door, immediately, what are some things that they look for?
Friendliness.
Say a little louder.
Friendliness.
Friendliness.
They look for a place to sit, and if all the back seats are taken, they might not come back.
They look at sheets. You know, it's funny, but that's true, Lily. They walk in, and that back area for the church, this might need to be a sermon for Sunday morning, but that back area of the church is often filled with people, and when they walk in, to them, that's the area where visitors should sit. And when people are there, it forces them to walk down the aisle past all these people, and then they sit down, which then could make it where they may not return. Now, what else do they look for?
Acceptance.
Acceptance, friendliness, acceptance, a good place to sit, to observe. Anything else?
They listen to the preacher, they listen to the lesson.
They listen to the lesson. Somebody said something over here.
An invitation maybe to lunch or to come back.
An invitation to lunch or to come back. And you know what's interesting? I think in our more modern culture, they walk in the door and they may not be looking for that, especially the younger culture, but when they get it, they notice. They don't forget. Yeah.
Passion. Like you can almost tell sometimes you'll walk in and almost feel kind of dry. Like no one really wants to be there. They're kind of just there to be there. But other times you walk in, it's like everyone is here for a purpose, and they're all joyous to be here. They're all excited. There's almost like a feeling that you can almost really feel in the room. Yeah.
Palpable. And if something has happened in the church, like let's say someone's died and people are affected by that, they notice that too. And it's not bad. I've had people come up to me after a service that we had on a Sunday morning, having just done a funeral within 48 hours, and they know how much the church loves because of that. And they come up and they're very appreciative of that kind of service. Somebody over here, Jerry.
I was saying one thing that, as a Christian, I look for, I walk into the church, I want to know the Spirit's there.
The Spirit's there.
And I look for that.
Yeah.
And this one's got it.
Amen. Thank you, Jerry. All right, Jack.
I have a number of things. I'll try to be very brief.
Okay, good.
So the first thing is, when Connie and I went to church once upon a time, nobody said a word to us before or after this service. The place was packed. A few years later, they had a split, and we went back to visit because someone said they had a new preacher and whatever, we might want to give them another visit. So we did, and everybody in the place greeted us and wanted to get to know us. Everybody. Number two, I heard a story from an elder who said they had a single mom. In some churches, single moms are shunned or whatever, especially depending on what their divorce was. And he said what he did was he just asked her, "Is there anything that we can pray for you about?" The next thing you know, word spread from her to her friends. These people care. They prayed for me, and now all her single mom friends start to come in, and they would have prayer together. So that shows a sense of caring and concern for the people that are there.
Yeah, do you know that broken people communicate with each other? Yeah, same thing, like, to use this example, I bet Linda has seen this, I've seen this. Speaking of, we talked about people who were asking for money several weeks ago, hobos and stuff, they communicate, they're broken, they communicate. When you're a church who gives out money, they all pop up. But when you have an open communication and a comfortable place where people worship, broken people talk. The same thing is true. Now, I want to show you that when I think of this sense of belonging, personal connection, and I think of Jesus, I cannot help think of when Jesus comes up to the leper, and the leper says, if you're willing, you can make me clean. And Jesus does this awesome thing. He says, I'm willing, but before he says it, what does he do? Then he touches him. It's the first thing he does. He has that physical, personal connection. And so we have to be careful not to fall in that summer brain, keep our distance. And though we may not intend to be doing it, we might be treating people like lepers. We don't want to do that. We want to be part of that. If they're a single lady who's come to church, which this church receives very well, if they're a parent who is a single parent who has children, sometimes a tendency is to, because some people are not comfortable around children, get in there, right? Another one is a comfortable environment. We finished Philippians chapter 4 on Sunday, and so we talked about comfort. We talked about what is being content. And so when we talk about comfort, we have a different way of thinking about comfort than the world. We find comfort in Christ, we find comfort in the Spirit, we find comfort in Christian brothers and sisters. The world finds comfort in a whole bunch of different ways. When I think of comfort, I think of Jesus, who takes the apostles and he takes them somewhere quiet. In solitude to pray. In order to build relationships within a church and grow a kingdom, you have to have a situation where people can have a spiritual connection that they're seeking to have when they go to church. And everyone here seeks that. You might seek it in a slightly different way, but everyone seeks that, whether it's through the word that is taught, or the songs that are led, or a prayer from somebody. Talk about Jim Craig's prayers. I think everybody felt the Spirit when he prayed. So, building relationships will help us with that. And I want to talk, I've got a little personal story. It was this last Sunday at Agape. Okay? So we had all the kids from Agape, which was a mixture of Agape, Elijah's Bible study group from Amarillo High, and a mixture of our youth group. And so I teach on the parable of the talents, and we had discussion, and then Elijah led this great little devotional, getting them ready for a prayer group where three of them would get together and talk about their green pastures and their dark valleys they go through Psalm 23. Very good. And I went to use the restroom after that was done, because I'm 43. And after that, I come out and I look over at the Drummond group, and Sam's not there. She's always with her brothers, but she's not there. You notice that? Of course you did. You were there. And I was like, where'd Sam go? She went into the sanctuary with two girls she didn't know to have that prayer time and to talk about the green pastures and the dark valleys. That's an example for all of us, isn't it?
Yes.
People you don't know, having that personal connection. Gosh, she's growing up. All our youth are. Another one, purposeful gatherings. Worship, and by worship, I don't just mean singing. I mean the entire experience of worship at 10:30 when it starts to whenever it ends, to that final prayer. Worship should remove all barriers that exist for praising and learning about God. Those barriers need to be removed. When I think of barriers, I think immediately of this. Anybody know what that is? It does kind of look like a statue, doesn't it?
It's a priest.
There's a priest with an advent. What are those
things facing each other. One's kind of covered up in the other one. What's that?
Cherubim.
Cherubim. So what is that it's standing on?
The ark.
The Ark of the Covenant is behind it. And so there's incense. So where is this?
Holy of Holies.
Holy of Holies. Okay. All right. You couldn't go in the Holy of Holies. The only person who could go in the Holy of Holies was the priest, the high priest. And so we see when Jesus dies, the Holy of Holies does what? It rips from top down. You went. When we add barriers, it's like we're going through and we're sewing up that curtain from bottom up. What are some barriers that you have seen in church or churches? I'll tell you one that Andy and I went to. You'll probably remember this. This was before we joined Anna Street, and we were looking around. Before I even got Gene on my radar to ask me to come be youth minister, we went to a church over there. I think it's now the Nazarene Church, Linden. We went in there. At the time, it was kind of I don't know what it was. I still don't know what the flavor is. We walked in. We were greeted. It was real nice people. And we go in. Everybody greets us. It's wonderful. And we're getting ready. And there's Bibles. And there's hymnals. And then there's a rock group up front. Okay, so when in my church at Portales, at 8 o'clock, my family always went to the tradition. Occasionally I would go to the other one because I had friends who were in that praise team who play guitars and stuff. So when I come in and I see this, I'm like, oh, okay. And they start up. I couldn't hear the person to my left. I couldn't hear the person to my right. I couldn't hear the person behind, and or in front of me or behind me. I couldn't even hear this. It was so loud. We left in 8 minutes. I had a headache. A barrier. Okay.
Something if I may.
Yes, go ahead. Does that answer the question?
Well, it talks about barriers.
Okay.
I know some people who go to churches and the barriers that they find are one, the thing being preached is not consistent with the word, or it's a self-help organization instead of a church organization. And number two, they find that the people there have put a zipper on that curtain by being so pious that they're the only ones that can be there, and they don't feel like they can be there because they don't have their breastplate on or whatever.
So you got the two
Together.
two sides. You got the ones that are super high church, so you feel as if there's almost like a barrier between what is holy and yourself, and then you got the one that's so far that it's the opposite of super high, and it's just self-help and things like that. And yeah, I get you. And you know what? Each church is a little bit different.
And some people that I know run into that as the same person.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, and they may, and I've known some people like that who may, well, let's keep going. No, thank you. I like it.
I guess because this is kind of a question that kind of pops up from talking to other people at school and stuff.
Sure.
How do we build relationships with people if one of their barriers may be not having a rock band or not having, or you know what I'm saying?
No, I know
It's
exactly.
everyone's barriers are different. So
Everyone's barriers are different. You're exactly right. So it's important for a church to know itself.
Right.
To understand who it is and who it's willing to remove those barriers for, and to understand within that setting, are there barriers that we have up that we are having unintentional, or are there other barriers? I've talked to other people the past few days where they've made some major changes that, me personally, I'm not there at that point, okay? So it's important to understand who you are and who you're trying to pull in, and what there is that you're able to remove it as a barrier. That's a good question. Does that create a barrier between you and them?
Not necessarily.
It shouldn't.
It shouldn't.
It shouldn't, because they're Christians, right? It might be a situation if you invite them to the church and they come, they don't see there's a rock band, and they really want a rock band. That's just not, that's just the way it is. You know what I mean? That's a great question. Check this out. Independent pintera kuti mulungu alankule kutsera mwa ine. Ndi kuti chukondi chake chionekera mau anga ndi mu mpingo umene unadintuma ine.
That's a barrier.
Amen.
That's a barrier. Okay, now that's Chichewa. That's part of my sermon I gave when I was in Malawi.
You shouldn't be
That's-
saying that here unless there's an interpreter.
That's right. That's my point. What if we get up and as preachers, we have, let's say, foreign language that nobody understands, or we speak in a way that's almost as if they don't understand, with like, doctoral level vocabulary the entire time.
Like reading C.S. Lewis when you don't really understand C.S. Lewis.
That's right. If I were to get up and just talk nothing about C.S. Lewis and not explain, like if I devoted an entire sermon to multiple C.S. Lewis things, there would be a barrier because he's a difficult read for a lot of people.
My
Jack.
uncle and I used to have conversations, and he would say to me, you know, Jack, we're having a seventh heaven level conversation here. Most people in the church wouldn't have a clue what we're talking about.
That's right. That's right. What about if you walk in and you don't hear a single song that you know? Is that a barrier?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Some people are open-minded, but that can be. What if somebody gets up? This happened while I was here the first time. And they pray. But they pray for 15, 20 minutes. Some of y'all might know who it is. I'm not even going to say the name. He was a godly man. I loved him. But I remember two things happening in that prayer. My son said, "Amen!" halfway through it. You did. And the second thing that happened, I kind of creeped my eye open, just, what's going on? And Gene kind of shuffles over there. He like this and things like, hey, we need to. Because he understood, he read the room, he looked out and people were like, we love prayer. We like to pray. But there are some things that we sometimes do that can be barriers. Let's say you're listening to the sermon and the guy's got his hand in his mouth.
That's a barrier, I guarantee you.
It's a barrier, right? He's always telling, get your hand away from your mouth, right?
Quit stroking your beards while you're trying to talk to us.
I trimmed it today so I wouldn't stroke it. It's a little shorter. It's not Gandalf. I would stroke it if it was like Gandalf. Lily would braid it. So the point is, there are sometimes barriers in church, aren't there? And we want to be cognizant about those barriers ourselves. And within ourselves, independently, be prepared to remove those barriers. Let's say after church someone's done, you want to go out to eat. Because a lot of those barriers get removed over conversation when you go out to eat. Oh, we don't usually have that, you know. But, all right.
Age could be a barrier.
Oh, that's a good one, Joyce. Thank you. I illustrated that a little bit with the young family with the kids. Sometimes I've seen older people just, that doesn't happen here. Okay? Not completely, not everybody's good with kids. Understand. And I cannot change your character. And you can't change my character.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But we can try to take the steps slowly. Okay? All right. So, going back to this, our events and programs. Too quick. I double clicked. Our events, programs should encourage the congregation. I think they do. I think we do a good job of whenever we have ladies thing this Saturday. That I could tell you to be encouraging. That's going to be a good thing for people to be at. Third and finally, effectively reaching a community. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, whom I really love to read, he said, the church is the church only when it exists for others, not dominating, but helping and serving. It must tell men of every calling what it means to live for Christ, to exist for others. People should be participating in service projects and outreach as much as they can, as much as they physically are capable. Everybody's gifts shift and change with age. Sometimes it shifts, and the only way you can really help is through prayer, watching, giving, donating. That's okay. But as long as you can, and you got the legs to work and do stuff, you're an example, aren't you, for younger kids? I kind of remember this from Isaiah. Is not this the kind of fasting I have chosen? You know, putting off yourself. To loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of yoke. To set the oppressed free and break every yoke. Is it not to share your food with the hungry and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter? When you see the naked, to clothe them and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood. Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear. Then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. When we look at the life of Jesus over and over again, he did so much light shine. Here's all the miracles, 37 of them. Every time he did a miracle or sign, it was light shining through in the darkness. And we can't do those miracles and signs, but we can't help people. We can't help people.
I know you're trying to get through to this, but can we back up?
Sure, just know are you wanting that list?
No,
Okay.
not necessarily. On a question.
Okay, I hope I can answer.
I want to ask us to ask ourselves, how are we accomplishing those things that are listed there?
Okay.
That's all.
Yeah, I think that's good. To not just leave it hanging, take a picture of it.
Actually, the next one.
Say
The
again?
next one.
Yes.
Oh, the list. And you can Google that.
Okay.
Do you think
That is from Blue Letter Bible.
do you think it's probable that's not all of them?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, the ones, we're told in John that more happened in Jesus' life than was written in the book.
Wasn't there like 300? Something like that? In the book?
Well, this is those, if you notice on the right side, some of them are recorded multiple times. Yeah.
Sorry.
Nope, you're good. Good question. Finally, we should understand and be able to articulate the church's mission, values, and activities. Did you know that? You should know what your church is doing.
Elevator speech?
Oh, yeah. Be prepared to have your elevator speech. You know, and I can give you something like it, but I would not memorize this. I just made this up. Don't memorize this, please. But I was thinking, okay, we are commissioned to build up Jesus' church through relationships, purposeful gatherings, and community work. We value Christian teaching, the gathering of the church, eating together, prayer, helping the needy, and hospitality. All those things are found within those scriptures I read. You'll notice worship's not there. You know why I didn't include it? Because it's all worship.
It's supposed to be worshiping all the time.
It's all worship. If you can sing like a songbird, but you can't do that other stuff, you're not doing it. I like C.S. Lewis, speaking of C.S. Lewis, as we wrap up. The church exists for nothing else but to draw men into Christ, to make them little Christs. If they're not doing that, all the cathedrals, clergy, missions, sermons, even the Bible itself are simply a waste of time. God became man for no other purpose than to draw them into Christ and to make them into Christ. There was once an elderly lady who had a young man living next door to her. And he always would come out and help her bring groceries. And she'd pull up, her husband had been dead years, and he'd come up and he'd help her bring the groceries in, get her newspaper, even to help her just move things out in the garden and help her garden at times. One day she said, "Son, how did you become such a fine young man?" He said, "Well, when I was a boy, I had a drug problem." Jerry, that's what she did. She furrowed her eyebrows. She said, in disbelief, "You had a drug problem? That can't be true. I can't believe that." Said, "It's true. My parents drugged me to the church on Sunday morning. They drugged me to church on Sunday night. They drugged me to church on Wednesday night." I say all this because I cannot emphasize enough the importance of what I'm talking about this evening. I love you guys. I love this church. From my heart, from my toes. But if we want kids to have that drug problem, and for their parents to drag them to those times, we have to become experts at building relationships. Experts at making people feel comfortable and answering those questions. Experts at guarding the accessibility of worshiping the I am and of learning. And we have to continue reaching out in the community. And I'll tell you what, this kind of work, it's not the kind that gets 1,000 people in a day. It's the kind that grows roots and lasts for generations and a century. I want to thank you guys for coming. I hope that this helped you. This is where my heart is. I want us to think about that, okay? If you have anything in mind to help us as a church continue to do that, feel free to talk to myself or any of the elders. I know they would love to hear your